Welcome into the Gramlich and Mac Lane podcast, presented by Ingles, the official supermarket of Gramlich and Mac Lane. We're back here with our ACC After Further Review series, and it's time to get into another massive brand, another team that I know people have a lot of thoughts about, Eric Mac Lane, and that is the Miami Hurricanes. A 10-win season, but we talked about this on a more recent episode. You know, did they overachieve, underachieve? I think we both kind of said underachieve even in a 10-win season. And I think some of their off-season moves perhaps indicate that they also think they underachieved.
Right. Yeah. It's good to continue these. You know, we took a little break there to preview a national championship. It's crazy the season's over. I mean, it's like literally we blinked and you know, here we are. We're looking spring ball down the barrel now and fully moving on to next season. But yeah, looking at Miami, it's one of those things where it's really hard, right? Because you and I know how difficult winning is. We also know how difficult going against expectation or having to live up to expectation when you haven't even been there in so long. But there was just a lot, it felt like, that was put into this season, resources wise, player wise, personnel, all these things. And for 10 wins, only 10 wins, it's crazy to sit here and be disappointed about that, but it's true. And that's the new age that we truly are in now with NIL, with the transfer portal, and with going out and acquiring talent very quickly. So it feels weird to say, but I do think a little bit of disappointment because of what you went out and got and how special Cam Ward was. I think there's a little bit of, Canes fans being annoyed that they wasted it, essentially. Same thing with Clemson fans and what Cade Klubnik was able to do this year. Defense just did not carry any weight, and Miami's defense significantly worse, like bad. And they made a change, and they bring in, a new defensive coordinator from Minnesota and Coach Hetherman there, who looks like a psychopath. So if it's any indication of what he looks like is his on the field presence or game planning, game calling, you're going to be in a good place, Miami.
Mac's very excited that he looks like a psychopath. I think that it's very healthy for a defensive coordinator to look like a psychopath. Like if your defensive coordinator isn't a little psycho, I think you're going to have problems. And so this is a good sign for Miami. And we do want to say we recorded this with Manny Navaro of The Athletic before this new hire was announced. So we do
Carson Beck. Two massive things had not happened. And we speculate a little bit.
We're going to get into Carson Beck as well. So just want to clarify that, but we're also mainly recapping the season. So it still worked out. Manny was awesome. And so we're going to get into that, talk about maybe a little underachieving, talk about the crazy Syracuse game. I still thought Miami was going to go up there and win that game, but hey, crazy things happened. But Mac, so they go a different direction and they move on. And I think it's a good sign. I think you had to, like you said, to have Cam Ward, to have this offense, and to not win the ACC, it obviously falls on your defense. So I think it's something that Mario Cristobal had to do. And then with Carson Beck, Manny was alluding to this in our interview, is that you've set the precedent. Like these guys are seeing, oh, look what Miami did for Cam Ward.
Right.
What can Miami do for me? And Carson Beck, he's much more proven coming into this than Cam Ward, but he's coming off an injury. And he's coming off a season that perhaps didn't go like he wanted. Some were saying he'd be the number 1 overall pick before the year. Obviously, that's not what we're saying now because he's coming back to college. But I think this is another big step for Miami saying, we're here. Like we're one of the big boys. We're back. We're going to go pay however many millions of dollars to get Carson back. We're going to get a new DC and we're going to compete once again. So I thought it was all signs from Miami that they're truly back in this big picture, if you will, Mac.
Right. And not just a one and done, which again can be so terrifying in this, again, new world where, you spend a bunch of money, it works out doesn't work out what you want. And then what happens the next year? Are you constantly having that flow and that, money just go in and out and, kind of recirculate there. So I love it. I love the move, going and getting a massive name again, another guy that declared for the NFL draft that Miami picks up the phone and says, hey, bro, you sure? We can probably
make more money here.
Right. You want to make more money and we can probably help you. Do you see what we just did with this guy? And I love what you said there. He is more proven. Maybe, statistically Cam had gaudy numbers before just because of the level he played. But I mean, you're talking about a guy that was at Georgia who has lost minimal games, who has played the best of the best, has seen the best of the best. And now he's coming here. How can he help you? Not only can how you help him. So I am fascinated to see it, because you look at his 23 year where he throws for nearly 4,000 yards at 72% completion rate. That's insane.
Yeah.
And even this year, statistically, still relatively on track, more touchdowns, did have double the interceptions, but a lot of that, and the completion percentage plummeted, to 65, which is still great. Georgia had a ton of drops, an ungodly amount of drops, and it was an issue. It was the reason they lost a bunch of different games. And so I am fascinated to see, what does that look like? How does he come into this offense? The offense is relatively pro style. It's not like a Jordan Travis situation from FSU where you have two very different quarterbacks. You have two very similar. Now, I think Cam is a bit better, with his legs and maybe more of a creator, but Carson can run. I mean, he took off, I think, of that first game against Clemson on a big third down play, and just it's a backbreaker when he can do things of that nature. So I'm fascinated to see that. What is he going to look like with the weapons around him at Miami, which is going to be some young guys, maybe a couple unproven guys, some guys in the transfer portal. But I think it's going to work, because he's going to have two unbelievable running backs, a fantastic, big, nasty offensive line. And again, he's a vet. He knows what to do. And this is basically a semi-pro stop right here, being at Miami before he goes to the big leagues.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it, Mac. And I also think it's going to work. I think most people think it's going to work, which, that also worries me a little bit. But I also think most people thought Cam Ward was going to work.
Sure.
There's just certain things that
injury. The injury is the only wild card. You have no clue. I mean, we have no idea. He could come back stronger, could come back worse. I mean, it is a bit terrifying, but I have to think maybe. I mean, listen, people do dumb stuff right now in college football, but I have to think that Miami has enough intel or belief, whatever, that they're throwing that much money, allegedly the most ever, at a transfer quarterback for a single year, that they kind of have their due diligence done, that they feel good about this guy's going to be taking snaps for 16, 17 games, whatever it takes to get to a national championship.
Also, Mac, we of course have to talk about the big story here, in that women's basketball has created all of this. Because if Haley Van Lith doesn't leave LSU to go to TCU, then the Cavenders don't leave TCU to go back to Miami. And of course, Carson Beck is dating Hannah Cavender, one of the Cavender twins. They play for Miami. So it all comes back to women's hoops, Mac. I mean, we know that. You and I know that.
You did,
but
you kind of left out you buried the lead a little bit, and what caused all of this? What single piece caused all of these things to happen? And that's Caitlin Clark, who busted Haley Van Lith to send her on her way.
I think HBL would have transferred anyway, because she was
Shout
a
out
terrible
Caitlin Clark, okay? She's making Miami better. Caitlin Clark's making Miami better.
You know what? You're welcome, Miami fans. Women's basketball saves the day. And of course, everyone knows that. We're just going to mention it because people, it's obvious. But Mac, we got to get to Manny. He was so good just recapping this season, and follow him on Twitter, everywhere else, his great work at The Athletic. And Mac, it's an interesting time because it is so cold. It's probably not cold where you guys are, Miami fans, and maybe a little colder. It is so cold in South Carolina right now that it's chili season, it's soup season, some grilled cheese tomato soup, like that. That's getting me through right now, because I feel like I live somewhere way up north, and I'm not loving that, Mac. But I do love that I can go to Ingles and get what I need.
Yeah, let me share this quickly about Ingles. So my mom has been in Tennessee a little bit recently, where I grew up in the Knoxville area. And I've mentioned this to you guys many a time before. She has sent me so many pictures at that Ingles, the same place, like literally the grocery store I grew up going to. She's been there for like the past 2 weeks, and I just love it. It's great to see it. I'm happy for her that she's around that and she can get that, because you're right, it's cold there too. She's had plenty of snow. We maybe get snow this week. You guys might too. Again, we'll see here. But you got to get the soups. You got to go to Ingles. They got everything you need. So really quick, a message from our friends at Ingles, and then let's jump into this interview with Manny.
Did you know that Ingles sells more organics than any other store? Or that they run their own dairy? Or that they only serve USDA choice and prime meat? Did you know that they have more local craft beer than any place else? Or that they have Energy Smart stores? Or that they professionally slice and package imported cheese from Europe? Did you know about their giant international aisle, local farm partnerships, curbside pickup, wine department? Or that they donate 3,956 meals a day to local food banks? Well, now you do. It's all in the bag. Ingles, low prices, love the savings.
Manny Navaro, brother, great to see you again. Welcome back to the podcast. Man, what a season for the Miami Hurricanes. I know maybe some people are disappointed. We'll get into all of that. But it was fun for me to see these guys play at a super high level, go out and get a quarterback that I just heard so much about. I remember my brother EJ Manuel calling me saying he's a guy, after the spring game, and then seeing it for the very first time, that first game against Florida, and just like, whoa, here we go. The Hurricanes go on to win 10 games, do not make it to the 12-team playoff, do not make it to the ACC championship game, but a monumental step for the Hurricanes. Big picture, what are your thoughts on these guys and what they're able to do in 2024?
Yeah, definitely a step forward. You think about the fact that Miami's been in the ACC now for 20 years, and this is just the second time in program history they got to double-digit wins. And I know that the ending wasn't exactly what Miami fans wanted, and we'll talk about that plenty. But look, they had the number one scoring offense in the country. Cam Ward, a Heisman finalist. Xavier Restrepo put up huge numbers. It was an exciting team to watch all season long, and even their losses were really, exciting, close, tight games. So I think from a big picture perspective, year 3 for Mario, you wanted to see growth. You wanted to see a step forward from 5 wins to 7 wins to 10 wins. You got that. But now we go into year 4 without Cam Ward, and it's going to be very interesting to see what Mario's been cooking up in the chemistry lab with a lot of those young guys and those great recruiting classes. So that's what we have to look forward to next.
Yeah, a great breakdown there, Manny. I think people forget that it's just Cristobal's 3rd year, but also forget what he inherited and just kind of the steps that they've taken. Now, let's speak about Cam Ward here, because we heard so much hype. The hype train was rolling heading into the season. Then the Florida game, you were like, okay, this guy's for real. And I've seen different people talking about, and you look at his numbers, it's hard to argue, the greatest season by a quarterback. I think that's fair to say for sure in Miami history. Maybe the greatest season by an individual player ever. How would you quantify and just describe what Cam Ward did this year?
Yeah, you think about it. Miami's had 6 quarterbacks in their history reach the Heisman finalist ceremony and get invited there. The 5 previous guys all won national championships. They were all part of championship teams. Cam, just here for 1 year, puts up better numbers than all of those guys. So didn't get the championship, obviously, but you think to yourself, man, what if they had one more year with Cam Ward, right? Like what might have happened with another year, but that's just those are the breaks. But without question, phenomenal season. And I think there are just so many moments that I go back to with this season and think snapshots, right? Like you think about the win against Virginia Tech when he just kind of flicks the ball off in the backfield to his tight end who goes and makes a huge play out of the backfield. You think about all the moments where he's escaping pressure and finding guys down the field, the Florida game, the touchdown in the back of the end zone to Jacoby George. Just so much excitement in general around this guy. So he 1,000% lived up to the hype. And really, you go back to when Miami got him in January, he was going to go pro and basically spent 2 weeks deciding, what am I going to do? Makes the decision to come back to college. And really, I think it was the best thing for him. He ended up putting himself into the first round of the NFL draft, potentially a guy who could be a top 5 pick here in April.
Yeah, we might discuss another quarterback that we've heard is maybe making a decision, who's in the NFL draft, but maybe transfer over to Miami. We'll touch on that towards the end. But just sticking with Cam Ward, and you mentioned some of those moments that they just take your breath away. This dude would make play after play, and it started literally game 1, rolling to his left, delivering a dot in the opening season in a 90,000 plus stadium and the craziness of the rivalry, and then just continued to do that every single game. It's who he is. He's what he does. What was the most impressive thing to you? It doesn't have to be a play or maybe something he said or just overall about his game. What to you is the reason maybe Cam Ward should be the first player taken in the NFL draft coming up?
He just made it look so easy from the get-go. I think about one of the first plays I saw him make against Florida, and it was just a scramble out of bounds, right? It wasn't even a throw. He was just evading pressure, and he just kind of walked over to the sideline and looked like Joe Cool, like just, hey, you can't even touch me, bro. Like he just stepped out, and it was like at that point, you knew this dude was different, right? He played the game at a different speed than everybody else. And so to me, I think he just kind of put a little bit of swagger back into Miami, right? We've talked about the swag factor at Miami for all these years. Hey, the Canes play with swagger. He's the first guy in a long time to play with that kind of swagger. And I think, whether or not, Mario has a big year in 2025 or not with this program, he set the tone for quarterbacks coming to the U, right? Like, you can come here and be successful again. Miami had a great run. I mentioned five other guys who had been Heisman finalists before Cam Ward. He's the sixth guy in Miami history to do it. It'd been a while since Ken Dorsey was here. So I think Mario's kind of had a stigma around his name. He's a quarterback. People have said this kind of stuff. He's a quarterback killer. It's like, well, no, look what Cam Ward just did at Miami. So I think he kind of sets the tone for Mario going forward. Hey, you're a good quarterback. You should come to Miami because we're going to put a lot of weapons around you and give you a chance to have success.
Yeah, it says a lot for guys that are looking in the portal and Miami trying to get their next quarterback in the portal. Okay, before we really just talk about the season as a whole, get to Restrepo, get to this defense, we're still talking about Cam Ward. So I just have to ask, Manny, and I'm not asking this with any sort of agenda, but I'm just curious, like, what were you hearing pre-Pop-Tart Bowl? And then what did you expect him to play the whole game? And then what was your reaction? And what do you think Miami fans' reactions were?
Well, look, I thought he would play a half at most. Obviously, Miami wanted to get a look at Emory Williams, and he hadn't had a chance to really play a ton this year, just kind of in garbage time early in the year. So you wanted to see what Emory looked like against a good Iowa State team who had, won 10 games heading into the bowl game. It was a good test for him. So I knew that some way, shape, or form he was going to sit out, whether it was second quarter on or second half on. It just so happened that, Cam's a tough guy to pull out of the game, man. Like, when he's in there, he does not want to come out. And Mario, I think, just, let him go the rest of the first half. Let him get the record, which I know was important to Cam. So ultimately, look, Miami fans are disappointed. They lost the bowl game. They're disappointed the way Miami played in the second half. Emory didn't have a great second half. But it is what it is. It was kind of an opportunity to say goodbye to Cam, let him have his moment. I know people get caught up in bowl wins nowadays. I think most coaches would tell you it's kind of an exhibition. It's a chance to see what you have coming around the corner for spring football. And I think Mario kind of treated it that way. He wanted to see some of his young guys get a chance, and you can't blame him for that.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing, man, because it's the further I'm getting away from playing, the further I'm getting away from like my locker room mentality and what I would have done and back in my day type of thing, because it is such a different world. It really is. Now, I can sit here and say I never would have done that, but I can also not say that I had millions of dollars attached, to my name, whether future or current. So it is so hard for me to put myself in those situations. But strictly as a fan, I was happy I got to see him one more time. Whether that was one more throw, 10 more throws, one half, a full game, whatever. I was just glad we got to see him. And I think it's a weird spot that we're in. I think it's a much bigger issue. KG and I touched on that a couple of weeks ago, just with bowl season in general and what we kind of need to do there. But, it is what it is. He got his last hurrah. He set the record. He's the scoringest touchdown thrower of all time. And that's great. And that's awesome,
Right.
To be able to say that. So, it is what it is here. Let's go big picture on this season, man, and kind of dive into some different things where, the Canes are rolling and get all the way to November and are undefeated. And, they're it's kind of weird. Like, there's some respect and then there's some disrespect in the rankings and, kind of where they were. I thought that they should have been much higher, throughout this entire process. A top 4 team the whole way. I think they maybe were as high as 5 or 6. And then that loss happens against, Georgia Tech. And it's like, we can't get past Georgia Tech. It's the weirdest thing, no matter what. What kind of leading into that were there signs? There's all these close games and some calls and things that happen. What were your thoughts when that game came around?
Well, for one, you mentioned calls. Obviously, the pass interference is going to live in Miami fans' memory. The non-pass interference call in that game near the end zone on about Isaiah Horton. But, to me, look, the offense is entitled to have one bad game. They were great all season long, and you got to give Coach Santucci and the Georgia Tech staff credit. They had a good game plan for Miami that game. I thought really made Cam Ward uncomfortable at times. And so they were only able to put up 23 points. But again, that kind of goes back to the defense with Miami, right? And sometimes you need your defense to stand up and make big plays. And there were so many opportunities in that Georgia Tech loss, especially in the second half. Miami had them 3rd and long in several situations, gave up pass plays where it was just breakdowns in the secondary. So to me, when you go back and you look at this season and you say, what's the downfall? I think Miami, it's funny how we talk about this non-college sports, right? They didn't invest enough money in their free agency in the secondary. I think they put a lot of it towards their defensive line. And those guys, look, Ruben Bain got banged up earlier. He wasn't the same Ruben Bain we thought he'd be. You didn't get the pressure and the kind of stuff you wanted all the time, consistency from that front. But in the end, I thought the coverage breakdowns were ultimately what doomed this team. Go back and look at Syracuse. You're up 21-0. You can't protect that lead, giving up, one-on-one coverage, busts, etc. So to me, Mario thought he had a good enough defense to get away with it at times. And I think in the end, they just got exposed for not maybe signing that extra safety or that extra DB that might have helped them out.
That's interesting, man. I think we all understood the secondary was the issue. And of course, some injuries. Like you said, I mean, Ruben Bain was in and out of the lineup and obviously just not super healthy throughout the year. And that'll be a big improvement for Miami next year. But do you think this is something that Cristobal looks at in the offseason and says, hey, when you look at the ACC as a whole, the one thing you really can't take away from this league is the quarterback play. Like, there are quarterbacks in this league that can dice you up in the secondary. So do you feel like this year has made that secondary just like, besides QB for them, maybe priority number one?
Yeah, it really has been so far in the transfer portal. They've gone out and gotten 3 guys that were, at least part-time starters to full-time starters from other places, young guys too, a couple young guys in that mix. So I think, they've addressed it so far. But I think, you fired your defensive coordinator at the end of the season. You got to hire a new guy. So whoever comes in has to get to know these guys, work with them, get them all on the same page. So it's going to be very interesting to see. But I think he's done a good job so far. Cristobal has prioritizing the secondary. Actually signed 4 guys in the secondary so far out of the portal. So, and I like some of the freshmen they got as well. Some young, freshmen that can come in. OJ Frederic, you saw him this year at cornerback, started 9 games for them, was really effective at times. So they have like a nice young nucleus now in the secondary. I think the talent's been upgraded. It's a matter of, hey, what does the coordinator want? What does he ultimately do here? And that's the question of the offseason going forward.
And Manny, you think the DC, and we're releasing this kind of mid-January, so you think the DC search could take a little while is kind of your initial thought?
Yeah, Mario's a very patient guy, right? When he goes through these interview processes, I've come to learn over time that he likes to talk to a lot of different coaches. And I know he's obviously had some conversations with guys already, but it's one of those deals where he's going to take his time and wait. I think he's going to look at some NFL guys that are available. He's going to have a lot of conversations and try to find the right fit. I thought Lance Guidry was a good pick 2 years ago when he hired him to come in and run the defense for Kevin Steele. And first year was really good. I think ultimately what caught up with Guidry again was the talent pool in the secondary and
Right.
just didn't do a good enough job developing guys there. But they've addressed it, and now the next guy will come in and have a chance to do better.
Yeah, it is interesting to me, man. I would love your opinion on this because you lose 2 guys in Cam Kitchens and James Williams that were really good and that have been there for a while. Is there more to the story than just giving up, 1 billion yards? I mean, he's not missing tackles. He's not falling down in coverage and,
Right.
Not doing his job there. Like what was the biggest reason? Because that is a big deal when you lose 2 All-American caliber guys.
Yeah.
What was it, misses on people maybe he went to bat for in the port? Like what do you think was the ultimate deal? Because I like Guidry too. I think he's great. I covered him, throughout his career. And I was shocked that they actually pulled the trigger and fired him.
Yeah, I think the way the season ended, really, I mean, you think about losing 3 of the last 4. I think that led a lot to why the decision to part with Guidry. I mean, statistically, they weren't horrible statistically on defense. They were kind of mediocre with the way the season ended. But
No.
I think a lot of what happened was just player development in the secondary. There's a lot of guys who've been signed in that secondary the last several cycles who just have not taken the step forward. And you look at who the young guys were. Damari Brown was a guy that they were expecting, counting a lot. He ended up playing 21 snaps, got hurt in the opener at Florida. He was supposed to be one of your starting corners. You lost him. Then you're kind of bring OJ Frederick along, but he's still a true freshman, right? He's still going to make true freshman mistakes. So you're playing him. And again, you mentioned the safety position. Mish Powell, I thought, did a good job. Mish Powell won them the Wake Forest game with that pick six. They don't win that game without Mish Powell. He was good. I just think, you counted on some other guys that really just didn't elevate their game. And when you go back and you look at the film, so many times where teams would run somebody in motion and that guy get lost in coverage. Like they just wouldn't pick him up. Go back to the Louisville game. Go back to the Syracuse game. There's so many times when somebody was running in motion where the eyes were kind of in the wrong place, and you're just like, why is that guy wide open? And I think ultimately, it was a personnel coaching issue where people just weren't getting it.
Yeah, it is fascinating. I know KG. 2 years in. I don't know. It's a lot of change. I mean, it's 2 offensive coordinators now, 3 defensive coordinators. There's a lot. There's something to stability and hunkering down with your guys. But we'll see. We'll see. How about any leads, Manny, on like anybody they want particularly? I know you said he's going to take his time. He's going to look at some NFL guys, but do you have like a dream list? Like if we get 1, 2, or 3, man, we're in a great spot.
Yeah, I don't know that there's necessarily a dream list, like a can't miss guy or something that he absolutely wants. Like in the past with offensive coordinator, you knew Mario always wanted Jason Candle, who ended up staying on as head coach at Toledo. With defense, I've never been able to get a real beat on who he's wanted to be his guy. Like Guidry was great at Marshall. I think what Mario likes is guys who can ultimately create problems on third down with pass rush, right? So that you can create some turnovers, create big plays on defense. Guidry fit that mold. Now the secondary's been such a mess this season that I think he just wants a guy who's really good at designing pass coverage and teaching guys how to cover. Miami, I just looked this up because I'm writing the end of the season sort of epitaph on Miami as you guys are talking to me about this. But Miami played more man coverage than anybody else in the ACC. And you go back and you look at their success rate, like, wasn't good enough. Like, they just really weren't good enough in man coverage. And I think ultimately you got to play a little bit of zone and mix things up a little bit more. You can't necessarily just, throw your cornerbacks out there on an island and expect them to make plays all the time. And so I think whoever it is probably going to be somebody who can throw in a little bit more of a mixture of coverages than somebody who's just going to play a whole lot of man coverage.
That's really interesting, Manny. Good stuff there. We know what happened against Syracuse. I want to talk about some positives, by the way. I want to get to Restrepo, but I have, and some other guys, Damian Martinez, but I want to ask about Syracuse because, to be honest, we're going into that game. And I'm like, Miami's not losing this game. Mac actually thought Syracuse might win the thing, but I was like, Miami's not going to lose this game. Like, they're going to go up there, they're going to handle it.
I've seen the defense enough, KG. I've seen the defense enough.
I get that. And of course, Kyle McCord, had a great day, and Syracuse has some great weapons at receiver and running back. Going into the game, Manny, what were your thoughts? Like, did you think like me, or were you thinking like Mac?
I was in the middle, to be honest with you. I was nervous because I knew their quarterback was going to put up numbers. I knew the secondary was potentially an Achilles heel, but they start up 21-0, and I'm sitting there like, hey, this is it, right? You're just going to run the football. You're going to salt this one away. You're going to win this by 2 touchdowns and feel good about yourself going into the ACC championship, and it just didn't happen. And you mentioned Xavier Restrepo before. Such an amazing career at Miami. If you think about, kind of coming up as that 3-star guy that was just a dude out there who, wasn't highly coveted by everybody in the country, worked his butt off to become a great slot receiver. And he has the worst moment of his life in that game, fumbling the football, just such a huge fumble. And I felt for him because it's like, man, you have such a great career. You're doing so many wonderful things for your team, helping you win games. And it's like, we're going to look back and say, man, but remember that fumble at Syracuse? And it's unfortunate, but it's like, that was such a game-changing, season-changing play that if he just holds on to the football and manages, to pick up a first down or whatever, Miami probably wins that game. But just a tough way to end the season. And hopefully people remember X for a lot more than that.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. I mean, he's got every other record, it seems like, for the receiver position, and such a dominant force, man. I mean, I'm looking at the stats here, and it's just his name, leading receiver, leading receiver, leading receiver, and the way he does it. I mean, it's not just like he's getting 3 yards at a time. I mean, he can take the top off. He's reliable as all get out in the short passing game. He's very crafty with his routes. I can't remember which game it was, but he's fallen down on the ground, sitting, and somehow
yes, Virginia
catches
Tech,
the ball.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, he's such a great player. Dive in a little bit more as you kind of mentioned, because I believe he's from Miami, just a homegrown kid, what it means for other people in the area, in the Miami and the Dade County, all those areas, to see that guy. And if he can do it, anybody can. Type of vehicle vibe.
Yeah, I live in Pembroke Pines, which is kind of a way inland west Broward city in South Florida here, and I see the Restrepo family quite a bit. His younger brother plays basketball in the same sort of league that one of my daughters does, and so I see the Restrepos. Not only do I see them at the youth basketball camp, but I see them at practice. I've seen them at practice, right? So many times. Mom and dad are always there, like always watching X, always supporting him. So it is really a family thing for X, and I hope people realize, like, this is 1,000% a homegrown kid who worked his butt off to get there. Like, X was running the hills at Tropical Park, at all hours of the day with his dad, doing all these hard workouts, because let's face it, he doesn't look like the prototypical, superstar receiver. He had to work to earn it, didn't have all the physical gifts, but eventually worked himself into it. And so I hope that's what Miami fans remember about X more than anything else is, we love to sit here and count stars and say, oh, what's this kid ranked in the composite rankings and all this kind of stuff. X threw all of that to the wind. He worked his butt off, and he got to Miami and made himself a great career, and really a great homegrown product. A guy who hopefully sets an example for others going forward.
Such a great story, and loved having him on every time we got to talk to him, and wish him just all the success. When you look at the running back position and just the run game, I mean, obviously Cam Ward brought a different dimension, right, with his legs. We'll see who Miami ends up with. Some of the names that we've heard, Mac, we alluded to that. Maybe some guys not as mobile as Cam Ward. When you look at the running game, right, Damian Martinez just hit the 1,000-yard mark, but it still felt like it was a little bit by committee. And had Fletcher in there, Lyle, other guys. Is that what Cristobal wants? Does he want a much more committee approach going forward, or does he still try to kind of want to find that workhorse back? And I know Martinez had 1,000 yards, so I get that, but it still felt like it was by committee.
Yeah, I think it has more to do with keeping guys fresh, right? Like I think a coach who's trying to win a championship and get to the college football playoff, it's a long season now, right? I mean, this could be a 15, 16 game grind, almost like an NFL season. So you can't have the same guys getting hit every single week and carrying the rock 25, 30 times. And so when you go back and you look at the way Mario handled it, he made Martinez his lead guy, but Fletcher, coming back from that foot injury that he had in the bowl game, came along slowly and was sort of at the middle of the season, took the baton a little bit from Damian and helped keep Damian fresh for what they were hoping would be a playoff run. And so I think ultimately that's the way Mario's going to operate going forward. I think next year it'll be Fletcher and Jordan Lyle show, and the two of those guys will be pretty special because, you've seen that Jordan Lyle kid explode with that speed. So, I think going forward it'll be the two of them, and we'll see who else, if Miami adds anybody else in the portal here to have a third back. They've got some other young guys that are coming in, etc. But I think Mario wants to have at least 3 guys that he can count on every single week. Yeah. A starter, a reliever, and what I like to call the fourth quarter closer, I think is the way Mario likes to have it.
You just have to have it, right? I mean, we saw it with Clemson. They had no run game. Really the last 2 games, of the season there in the ACC championship and against Texas in the playoff. It's hard to just have one. It's hard to just have one guy you're giving, 200 and something carries to. Now, SMU did it somehow, some way, but it's really difficult, to do that now in age, especially if you're trying to go on a run and if you're trying to keep guys healthy. It's a fascinating deal there. So I loved it. I loved having the rotation. I think Mark Fletcher's going to be really good next year. I think he's shown flashes of just like, wow. That's a dude, and he's homegrown. He's been there. He's a guy that's been there his whole career. How about this offensive line? I was really impressed with them as well. There was spots with some injuries. Jalen goes out for a couple of weeks, comes back, and ultimately they found their five they liked the best. What kind of did you see that you liked? And then even moving forward, who are some guys that you think will continue to step up?
Yeah, they got Markel Bell out of the JUCO circuit last year, and he was supposed to come in. I mean, we saw him the first day of practice, and we're like, Jesus, this guy's a monster. He's a
He took a
skyscraper up
wrong
there,
turn. Basketball's that way.
Yeah, exactly. 6'7", I think he's probably closer to 6'8", and just when you mentioned the injury to Jalen, he came in at left tackle, and I thought he did a pretty good job filling in for Jalen for those 4 or 5 games that he was out, and started and played well. He's a guy now that's going to be the anchor, I think, on that side, and we know now with the Diego Pavia ruling that he may have actually 2 years left instead of just 1, right? Because of all the things going on with the junior college players. So Miami feels good about him at left tackle. They've got Matthew McCoy at left guard. He started all 12 of the 13 games at left guard for him. Third-year guy. They feel good about that. You look at the right side, you got Maui Go at right tackle. You got Inez Cooper, as I like to call him, the wall on the right side of that offensive line. So you've got 4 guys that were starters for you coming back. Zach Carpenter did a good job at center when they brought him in, the transfer from Indiana. And now they've gone out and picked up another transfer in James Brockemeyer from TCU to come in. So it's kind of like they've got their plan. Build the outside, find a center each year who can come in and step up, and then develop those young guys behind them to step in when they're ready.
Yeah, what's my guy Sampson doing? Is he going to crack into there and play a little bit, or what do you think there?
Yeah, listen, you never know what happens with injuries, and certainly Sampson, I think, got himself a pretty sweet NIL deal, which would want to keep him in town, right, at developing. And here's the thing. Where else would you rather be than with Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal, who have a pretty good track record of helping you get to the next level? And so I always remind people of that all the time. It's like, you know what? You can criticize coaches for a lot of stuff. Mario, you can't criticize him on the offensive line, right? You can't. He just keeps putting guys out there every year that are quality. And Jalen Rivers will be the next draft pick, and we know Maui Noah is probably going to be a first rounder in 25. So it just keeps going and going and going. And so I think Sampson's going to hang around, maybe be the 6th guy. If something happens to somebody, he jumps in there and takes over, and you hope that's the case.
Well, and that's obviously music to Miami fans' ears, because the O-line was a problem for decades, is probably the way I would put it. And of course, Cristobal's fixed that pretty quickly. Let's talk about the D-line quickly here, Manny, and then we'll get to expectations for next year. But we brought up Ruben Bain. He technically played in 9 games, if you count Florida, right? Even though he got hurt early. Yeah. I don't know. Was he healthy? Like, what do you feel like is the next step overall for Ruben Bain? And could we really see kind of that breakout year for him next year?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing for Ruben Bain and even Akeem Mesidor, who by the way, could be back again for another year in Miami. Akeem Mesidor's technically got 1 year of eligibility left. They're kind of tweeners, right, on the defensive line. They can play inside, they can play outside, and that's cool. You need that. You need guys that can bounce around a little bit and have that versatility. But I think for Ruben, his body type, he needs to figure out what he is for his NFL future, right? Are you going to be out on the edge chasing quarterbacks? Are you going to be a little sleeker, or are you going to beef up and just say, hey, I'm going to be an interior defense? I think at some point you have to make that decision as a defensive lineman. And I think for Ruben, we're in the middle of that process, right? He just got banged up, missed several games this season, and really wasn't himself. I think the number one thing for him is get healthy, figure out a body type. What am I going to be? And then once he does settle into that role, you could always move outside for a couple snaps or move inside for a couple snaps. But I think pick what you are and go from there if you want to be in the NFL and be a first, second, third round pick.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And it is hard, right? I think of a guy like, Ashton Gelati, same type of deal, at Louisville. He's a bigger defensive end, and I think he's going to be asked to move inside. So if you can do it and commit to it in college, it helps with the ceiling, I think, and it helps you kind of grow there and do some things of that nature. All right, we know overall the defense was just not good, but silver lining, who are some guys coming back? Who are some guys that, in the spring you're excited to see how they will continue to grow and develop, and then even into fall camp into 25?
Oh, listen, Miami has signed a boatload of blue chippers here in the last few years on that defensive line. We talk about Ruben Bain, but they've got other guys that just came in the door. Justin Scott is one of the best interior defensive linemen, I think, in terms of, the future and what he could potentially be. Miami's coaches were really excited getting him out of Illinois. He ended up playing about a little over 100 snaps this season, getting in most of the time sort of in garbage time, but he did play in the bowl game, and he showed you what he could be in little spots. I think Armando Blunt's another guy, Cole McConaughey, Booker Pickett. I mean, all of these guys were like top 100 type recruits coming out of high school. You know this, Eric, from your days at Clemson. I mean, eventually those guys get it and they get on the field and they're ready to go. And I think Mario's supercharged about what he's got on the defensive line. I think at linebacker, Raul Aguirre, he's been here 2 years now. You talk about losing Francisco Maui Noah, your linebacker, your starting middle linebacker. You got Wesley Besainth, who's going to be back. Well, you throw Raul Aguirre, you throw a Cam Pruitt, who was a true freshman, showed flashes as well. I think those three guys are probably your future at linebacker. And we talked about the secondary already. O.J. Frederic, Zaquan Patterson, who's a standout recruit as well, started the bowl game at safety. Damari Brown, hopefully he's finally healthy. I think they've got horses. Now it's just a matter of, hey, are they healthy? And who's the defensive coordinator and how do you make it all work? And I think, it's you got to be optimistic, at least based on a talent level, because it's there.
Yeah, and with health, you'd have to think optimistically things would get better too. Manny, let's look ahead here. I know it is way, way, way too early. It is January. But I'm taking a peek at this Miami schedule. We just have the opponents, right? Not the dates yet. But we've got Notre Dame here to start the season, which is really fun and exciting. South Florida on the schedule again, Florida on the schedule again, obviously Florida State, at SMU, at Virginia Tech. Those are interesting, hosting NC State, hosting Louisville. Another, I think maybe a little more difficult schedule than last year if you look at like adding a Notre Dame, but still really good. Like lots of opportunities, lots of exciting matchups. What do you feel like should be expectations, even though we don't know who the quarterback is yet, Manny, or the defensive coordinator?
Yes, it's really hard, right, to guess what they're going to be. Look, I believe in what Mario's done on the offensive and defensive lines, and I think Mac would support this thought process. When you're good there, you should have a chance, right? You should have an opportunity to be a pretty good football team again. So I think this is at the very least on paper an 8-win team, a team that could potentially get to 10 or 11 wins with the right quarterback, with the right defensive coordinator, with some guys who step up into roles that you expect them to because of the talent that they have. This isn't a team that I see going from 10 wins to 2 wins or 3 wins,
Who
right?
could have done that, Manny?
I don't know. I didn't mention anybody by name, but I just don't think they're that kind of program. So I think you can bet on that they will be a winning team next year. I just don't know how high that ceiling goes.
Breaking
Manny
news.
from the top rope.
Go to the bank and put 3+ wins for Miami next year. Sign it up here. I love that. That was hilarious. That was very good. Let's talk quarterback. Last thing, let's talk quarterback and let's get you out of here. Is there a couple of targets? Is there a couple of whispers, things that you have heard that Miami is maybe eyeing and looking at? Because I'm not being rude. I'm not being mean. I don't think there's a quarterback on the roster that they feel good about being the guy. What are they looking at? Where are they going for QB next year?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think ultimately you got to look at some of the rosters, the teams that are still playing right now or just finished playing in the playoffs. I think one name that's obviously out there has been Carson Beck, the quarterback at Georgia, who was the starter there. Has been dating one of the Cavender twins on the basketball team.
Yeah.
I think there's without question a chance, a possibility that if he doesn't go to the NFL, the thought prior to the year, of course, was he was going to be a first-round pick. Didn't have necessarily the kind of season he wanted. Then he hurts his elbow in the SEC championship game, gets sidelined. So who knows if, Carson's thinking he's a Florida guy to begin with, plays up in Jacksonville, right? I mean, maybe maybe come on back home for one more year and do the Cam Ward thing and help the Canes out. I think that's a possibility. I think Quinn Ewers is another possibility for Texas. I think, you think about the situation at Texas. They're playing in a very important game, obviously, here this week. We will see what comes out of it. But there are a lot of people who want to see Arch Manning on the field take over next year. So if he doesn't go pro, if Quinn decides to come back to college, I think he's a name you'd have to consider as far as a guy that I think Miami would try to put an attractive package for to get them to come back and play quarterback here. So look, the bottom line is there's proof of concept, right? Miami showed it this year with Cam Ward. They've got some talented guys on both sides of the ball. So whoever they ultimately get here in the portal, and they will get someone, I think you'll be able to step into a situation where you got a really good offensive line, you got a really good backfield, you've got some young, talented receivers that are certainly playmakers, and then you've probably got a defense that's going to be better than last year. So it's probably a win-win situation. It's just a matter of who wants to come and get it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I love this new world we're in, baby. You just don't know. You don't know. Guys going pro, and then boom,
Free
all of a
agency
sudden,
every year.
you're in Coral Gables. Nobody saw it coming. Manny, you're the best, brother. Great talking with you. Thank you so much. We're excited to see what the Canes do here in the next couple of weeks, maybe next couple of months, and we'll get a better idea on 25. But grateful for your time always.
Anytime, guys. Good talking to you.
Thanks again to Manny Navaro for joining us and all of his insight on the Miami Hurricanes. Excited to get into Miami this offseason and, what we're hearing, what we're seeing from some of these new pieces down there in Miami. But next week, we're getting into a few more teams. Clemson's on the docket. We also have our ACC schedule release reaction, which is going to be very interesting. Yes, because, I saw someone posting today about Syracuse's schedule for next year. That right now, if you look at, someone posted a way too early top 25, and Syracuse plays like 5 or 6 way too early top 25 teams because they have so many. They have all the good ACC teams, and they have Tennessee and Notre Dame on there. So we'll just start thinking about Syracuse. They may end up with the hardest schedule.
If you want to preview a little further, like maybe 2 weeks from now, our guy Brent Axe, not super excited about it. Not super excited.
He's not going to hold back. He's going to tell you what he did.
And he gets it. It is reasonable, but that schedule's brutal. So anyway, like you said, KG, that's coming down the pipe. Always appreciate you guys. Always appreciate your support. It was an unbelievable, our best year yet. And it's been a trend with y'all. You'll just keep coming back for more, and we always appreciate it. So much thanks. And keep riding with us. Go hit subscribe if you don't already. Turn your alerts on. We've got a new schedule, as KG has alluded to, Sunday nights and Tuesday nights for kind of this off season, the spring ball season as we get into it. So always appreciate you guys, everything you do for us. But until next time, we'll see y'all.